Good morning, everybody. First of all, I just want to say, I've been gone for a long time. I don't remember when I posted my last video. It was like 6 months ago. Actually, it was probably way longer than that. But yeah, I've been gone for a decent amount of time. I just life happened. Got a girlfriend, all that cool stuff. She lives with me now, so we've been dealing with all that bullshit, being an adult. First of all, I just want to preface this video saying that this is not going to be like my other videos. My other videos I talked about, we did the music reactions, talk about all that stuff. I think the closest I've ever delved out of like the music kind of arena, if you want to call it that, was the video I talked about Diddy. And I'm going to delve a little further into that today, into the political atmosphere. So if that is not for you, then you should leave. But at the same time, you should also listen to this because I feel like it is important that everybody pays attention to what's going on right now because it could escalate. And I think even though I don't have the biggest following, I still think it's important to talk about it. If you live in America, you understand what's going on right now, right? Whether you're, left or right. I'm not going to get into that. Frankly, shit's been going haywire since January 20th. That's the easiest I can say, right? If you've been living under a rock or you don't pay attention to the news or you don't give a shit, whatever excuse you want to use, ICE have been conducting raids, since January probably. I don't really keep up to date on everything ICE is doing because, it's bullshit. One of the big problems that is happening in America, at least in the eyes of MAGA and Republicans or, the far right, is the immigration that's been happening in the past, whatever, 250 years. But it's become a big topic in modern politics, especially today, with how many immigrants are coming into our country as refugees or such and such. That was a big point of last election. And so as soon as Trump got elected, we saw ICE raids and deportation spike. We have the, I'm just going to call it a concentration camp, El Salvador, Guantanamo Bay, whatever. I don't know. But yeah, the sending people to a prison, the wrongfully sending people, putting tourists in detention. Like I saw the story about the Canadian tourist who was trying to go back to Canada after she traveled here for work. They're showing up at schools, elementary schools. They're showing up at workplaces. They're taking people out of their homes in the name of making the country safe. They're masquerading it as that. That's frankly what it is. It was kind of like tame in a stealing people out of their houses tame. But now it's getting to a point where we're really seeing like how far this could go and how far this could escalate, because this weekend in LA, ICE has been, I want to say fear mongering, because that's what it is. That's what it looks like. They've been driving MRAPs and military vehicles through the streets of LA, going in and conducting raids, and people started protesting because, when you like militarize this movement, which, like, I'm all for legal immigration and people coming to this country as long as they're, doing it correctly. But if we're going to get mad at them for doing it incorrectly and then kick them out violently or deport them incorrectly, if that makes sense, then I feel like it's extremely hypocritical. And that's what we've been seeing. They're literally like looks like military convoys driving through the streets of LA. So people are protesting. Because like there's like millions of people in this country that are undocumented, probably. I don't know the numbers. But a lot of people in this country come here to try and make a life better for themselves, right? They want to, say, oh, all immigrants are terrorists, or, Trump said all immigrants are like animals or something, some crazy shit, right? Just straight up racist lies. Anyways, the raids in LA have been going on, and the protest started this weekend, and it has escalated fast because ICE has basically everything I've heard about the protest and how they turned to like rioting is because ICE started like fighting back. I don't know what term to use. But anyways, ICE escalated the protest, and then the protesters escalated back. They started throwing tear gas, rubber bullets, non-lethals, all that stuff. The LAPD got involved because they called it an unlawful protest, which is what happens at every protest for some reason. Every protest nowadays is unlawful to the government. And then Trump goes on Twitter or Truth Social, whatever that bullshit is, talking about how, I don't know if he said this specifically, but the administration wants to talk about how this is an insurrection and they're all criminals fighting to keep criminals in the country or whatever. And I just think it's ironic because we all saw January 6th and we all saw what happened with Trump inciting that. And that was domestic terrorism. You can call it what you want. I'm going to call it what I say it is, right? Storming the Capitol is domestic terrorism. Protesting against ripping people out of their houses, to me, that seems like a protest to domestic terrorism. But if Trump and his administration wants to call it an insurrection in violent and radical left virus bullshit, whatever they say nowadays, then, whatever. We'll keep it pushing. I feel like it's important to talk about this because people have been crying fascism for months now. They were crying it when Trump was running. At a certain point, it's like we don't need to call everything fascism because it's going to take away when the real fascism starts. Jon Stewart said that. Love that guy, by the way. Y'all need to watch Jon Stewart. That's all I gotta say. I think now is an important time in history, modern history. Like, it's happening right now. We can see it happening. I think the fascism is finally showing itself because they're sending ICE in. They're like showing up at Home Depot to find undocumented immigrants. That's the most racist shit I've ever heard. I don't know if that's true, but I've heard it multiple times, and it wouldn't surprise me. Ripping people out of their houses, deporting them with no due process. The Constitution legally says that every person residing in this country deserves due process. Every person, including undocumented citizens, tourists, everybody. If you commit a crime in this country, you require due process. So that alone is breaking the law before you even get into the ICE, the military, like showing up. And that's the point I want to get to next is now Trump labeled these protests as an insurrection and like a rebellion. And he sent 2,000 National Guard soldiers, members. And it's like, where was that when, we had the insurrection, the actual domestic terrorism? Where was that? Because we're okay with that, right, Trump? We're okay with, inciting a revolution. But when people want to protest, which is their right to protest, right? It's their right to wear a mask as well. He said on his, Twitter, mind you, I just want to point out, he called Governor Newsom Governor Newscum. That's our president, right? That's a middle school joke. Can we acknowledge that for 1 second? This guy's 78 years old, I think. I don't know. Don't really give a shit. Yeah, he's calling Governor Newsom Governor Newscum and in the same tweet saying that the radical liberals need to stop wearing masks because it's illegal or something like that. And it's you have these people coming in with no name tags, no badges, no logos, nothing, just coming in military gear in their military trucks and then ripping people away from their jobs, their homes, their schools. And then you expect people to not be upset. And then when those people get upset, you send in the National Guard. And then Pete Hegseth is threatening to send in the Marines, which is literally martial law. They're sending in the military to stop protests, which in my mind, that is fascism. This is where it starts. But the concern that I want to bring up is what I've been thinking about is when does it stop? They've already deported students for speaking out against Israel. I know they've definitely took away people's visas for that. So these people are going to get arrested for speaking out and protesting against the corruption that's been going on very blatantly. And then where does it stop from there? Because think about all the people that have spoke out against this. Think about all the protests that are happening. It's starting in New York now. The New York protests are happening as well at the same time as the LA. In my opinion, I think we're too late, because I think it should have started sooner. Granted, I'm not in a city big enough. I live in a rural town in the middle of buttfuck nowhere, so I can't do shit. That's why I'm talking to you, hopefully, whoever sees this. If you can, say something, post something, get out there and protest. That's basically what I want to say, because if we don't say stuff, if we let this go over and continue to happen, it's just going to get worse and worse. They're going to throw actual citizens in jail. I mean, he's literally talked about deporting criminals that are US citizens. So at what point do they start considering anybody who disagrees with them a criminal and just throwing them out the country? Right? Where's the line going to be drawn? We've seen it in history. People that disagree with what the government is doing and criticize the government being thrown in jail or thrown out of their own country because, fascism. That's just what happens. I was even thinking, like, taking it a step further. I'm not saying that it will happen, but it could happen. We could have a second Boston Massacre. Like, I was thinking about today, like, that could happen at any second, because the feds are the feds, right? And we've seen them, like, go in and incite riots and all that stuff. I mean, they're doing it openly, escalating the protests from their side. So when does it get to a point that it's gone too far and then we have actual, like, civil war in this country? But at the same point, we can't stop protesting, because if we let it slide, it's just going to get worse. So either way, I don't think there's a good way out of this. I think the will of the people at the end of the day is stronger than the corruption. And I think it is best to speak out and fight against this, because this just needs to stop. I don't care what you think about immigrants and illegal immigrants. People should not be getting ripped out of their houses. I shouldn't be showing up at schools in their military equipment and taking kids out of classes and all this stuff. This stuff shouldn't be happening in modern America. We could have way better solutions to the immigration problem. We're wasting all this money deporting people and then putting them in prisons and then keeping the prisons running and sending them back to countries they don't even come from, when we could find better solutions to get these people actually into the country legally. I think a good percentage, a high percentage of these people want to be here legally, safely. A lot of them have applied for citizenship and they got denied, but they decided to stay here because they want to be here. If people want to come here to commit terrorist acts, they're going to do that. There's a strong difference between a terrorist and an immigrant trying to make a better life. I've been arguing this forever. Like, we voted in a felon who's got 34 counts against him and an immigrant from South Africa who both of them come in, do terrible shit for the government and the economy. Elon Musk just runs away free in no consequences. Now he's arguing with Trump. That's a distraction. But the Hispanic mom and dad down the road who want to make a better life for themselves and work 2 to 3 jobs so they can raise their kids, they're ruining this country. So, I don't know. There's just a lot I could talk about. I just want to see how this does, because I've been thinking about getting into this kind of video style, like these topics, for a while now, because I can't stand to, like, sit there and just, like, let it happen. I've got to talk about it. The main thing is that we finally reached the point of true fascism. This is like martial law, but not even really martial law. It's got to be breaking something in the Constitution, because you can't use the National Guard as a, like, enforcement group or whatever. And then they're going to send in the Marines for a violent protest that was escalated by a government organization. And, like, where does it stop? That's the question that I want to throw out there, is how far does this go? Because we're already seeing how they talk about the protesters and how they talk about immigrants and people that support the immigrants. That's I just want to throw that out there for people to think about and talk about, because that's important to me. I've rambled on long enough, way longer than I thought I would. People need to start talking about this. We can't just let this slide, right? Because if we let this slide, then we're just as bad as the people that support it. If you see this video, if you watched even 2 minutes, if you're still here at the end, thank you for watching. Please talk about this with your family, your friends. Like, we need to start talking about this. There's a TikToker I watch. I can't remember his name off the top of my head. I think it's Justin something. If you search him up, you'll probably find who I'm talking about. He made a video talking about making the narrative before they can make the narrative. And I feel like that's important. And that's kind of what I want to do, is like tell the real story of what's happening before the government spins it on us and makes the protesters look like terrorists or whatever they want to do. Share this video if you want to. That'd be greatly appreciated. Like I said, people need to start talking about this, or it's going to get worse. If you can, go out, support the protest. If you feel it's unsafe, don't go, but speak out still. If you do go to protest, stay safe, wear a mask. Despite what Trump says, who gives a shit? I've talked long enough. Y'all have a good day. And like I said, just stay aware of what's going on. Start talking. Bye, guys.